Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And I'm so glad you've joined me for part 2 of our story, because this is a fabulous story and you're really going to love it. So let's continue with part 2 of our story. I can't believe you're Ethan's sister and you're really here. He talks a lot about you. He was saying he couldn't wait to show you all around Boston, and here you are. I gather you've never been here before. No, I haven't, Kim admitted, not caring to mention the fact to this blonde stranger that she was not actually Ethan's sister. So what do you think of Boston, then? Asked the girl curiously. Well, I think it's got a very nice, upbeat vibe, said Kim. But I haven't been here long enough to get a good impression of the place. But it has, hasn't it? Said the girl, looking pleased. I'm a small-town girl myself, so when I first came here, it was a wee bit daunting, let me tell you. But I've got used to it. I love it here. There's so much going on, you know. It's got a happening, upbeat vibe. And I've met amazing people here, including your brother Ethan. He's super cool, he is, and all the girls love him, let me tell you. My name is Georgia, by the way. Ethan is going to be made up to see his little sister again. I take it your coming here fortuitously like this is a lovely surprise for him. He's going to be as pleased as Punch to see you, Trish. But word of warning, he has looked better. I'm afraid your brother knocked back a few too many beers last night. Actually, we all did. He was staggering around the place like a drunken sailor. But I'm sure he'll sober up after a hearty breakfast, she chuckled. He's in a sorry state, but then again we all are. Look at me. I look like death warmed up. You don't look too bad, said Kim politely. Oh, I like you already, Trish. You're ever so nice. Quite the charmer, just like your brother Ethan. Just so you know, we were all dossing in the living room last night. Too drunk we were to make it to our own beds, she said, giggling. We were watching horror movies last night. She made a contorted face. Have you ever seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? She asked, raising a brow. It is horrible, horrible. Guaranteed to give you nightmares. You watched that? Asked Kim, looking appalled. I've heard about it. It's a very creepy movie. I wouldn't watch it myself. Georgia rolled her eyes. You are telling me? I freaked the hell out. But everyone insisted we watched something scary. I wish to God we hadn't. I didn't get any sleep last night. I bet you didn't, said Kim. She hadn't enjoyed the fact that Georgia had mentioned that Ethan was very popular with the girls here in Boston. That was not what she wished to hear. But she was eager to see him, and that was all that mattered. Her heart began to beat excitedly as she followed Georgia down the dingy, rather glib-looking passageway into the largest room in the house, where there was a grand fireplace, elegant sweeping cream curtains that framed the windows, overlooking views onto the street. But the curtains were drawn, so the room was steeped in darkness. She could hear the rhythmic snoring and see lumpy bodies cocooned in sleeping bags scattered all over the room rather liberally. It looked a little like the bodies you tend to navigate your way around in airport lounges. The cloying stench of old cigarette smoke, intermingled with the herby stench of weed, made Kim want to sneeze. The smell was obnoxious and cloying. Where was Ethan? She couldn't make out the bumpy shapes, clandestinely hidden beneath all the covers. She could hear the snores filtering around the room, but she did not know which body belonged to which sleeping bag. The coffee table was covered in empty beer cans, along with pizza boxes, ashtrays filled to overflowing with cigarette butts. The room looked like a bomb had hit it, and it was clear to Kim that these students, including her boyfriend Ethan, lived like pigs. She was absolutely certain that if she walked into the kitchen, the sinks would be full to overflowing with dirty mugs and unwashed dishes. She squirmed with disgust, unable to hide the revulsed expression on her face. She almost wanted to tidy up after everyone. Cell phones were littered across the floor, along with people's jackets and overcoats. Georgia pointed towards a lumpy eiderdown spread out on a large couch. Ethan is over there, she whispered with a giggle. It seemed Georgia found everything amusing. Or was her giggle like a nervous twitch? Kim could not be sure. "I can't wait to see his expression when you wake him up," Georgia whispered to Kim. She stood there watching Kim as she manoeuvred herself over several landmines, from the crumpled bodies lying across the floor, to beer cans liberally scattered everywhere, towards the sleeping form that lay on the couch. Kim shook the body beneath the large eiderdown, and Ethan's grouchy, less than amused head popped out of the covers. "For God's sake, leave me alone," he grumbled. "Can't you see I'm trying to sleep?" He looked disorientated and confused, his spiky hair flattened at the top. "Ethan, it's me," said Kim. Ethan's eyes suddenly popped wide open with a start, and the expression on his face did not look pleased. When he saw Kim's face staring down at him, he reddened, and then his red skin dissipated and grew a deathly shade of white. "Kim," he said, stammering awkwardly, "what are you doing here? Why are you here?" Kim gave him a mischievous grin. "I came to see you, of course, Ethan. Why haven't you been answering my calls? I've left you tons and tons of messages. I've been worried sick about you, Ethan. But I've got an amazing surprise for you. Guess what? We're going to spend the weekend together in a posh hotel. No expense spared." "What's going on?" said another head, popping out of the cover that Ethan had been basking under. The other body was tangled up with Ethan's. "Who are you?" asked the head that was covered by a mop of brown curls, as a pair of brown eyes studied Kim rather curiously. "I'm Ethan's girlfriend, Kim." "Who are you?" asked Kim, staring at the young woman with wide, horrified eyes. "And what are you doing snuggled up to my boyfriend like this? Isn't this a little cosy?" The young woman sat up with a start to glare at Kim. "More to the point, who are you?" asked Kim pointedly. "I've never seen you before. I'm Ethan's girlfriend, Kim. What are you doing in my boyfriend's arms?" The young woman sat up with a start to glare at Kim. She snorted. "I think you're out of date, girl. You and Ethan were over a long time ago, I believe. Now why don't you go running back like a little good girl to your North Carolina town where you surely belong? Ethan doesn't want you hanging around us like an unwanted spare part, so off you go. And just so you know, I am Ethan's girlfriend, Jenna. We've been together for the last 3 weeks. You and Ethan, you're over like a bad smell. But clearly you just don't get the message, do you?" she said, shaking her head vigorously and trying to straighten out her messy hair by running a hand through her flattened but buoyant curls. "You've got your wires crossed, girl," said Kim, "because Ethan and I have not broken up." Ethan bashfully tried to avoid Kim's gaze. "I'm sorry, Kim," he said sheepishly. "I thought if I blocked your cell phone calls, you would get the message. I didn't want to hurt you. But it's over between us. As you can see, I have a new girlfriend now. This is Jenna. We've been together for 3 weeks. I'm sorry you had to come all the way from Boston. But you know—" "You bastard!" said Kim. "You bastard! How can you do this to me? I can't believe you didn't have the guts to tell me what was going on. How pathetic you are! You haven't got the decency to do the right thing, have you? To tell me the truth. You make me sick. My mother, father and brother were right about you all along. And look at me. I was defending your character to them. And all the time, they were right. And I was wrong. My mother said you could never, ever be trusted. Turns out my mother's right." Kim picked up a couple of beer cans she found lying on the floor and threw them at Ethan. "So all that stuff about us getting married one day was lies, was it?" And with that she stormed out of the house, with Georgia tagging behind her, with an expression of grievous concern on her face. The young woman ran after Kim. "I thought you were Ethan's sister Trish," she apologised. "I'm so sorry. You didn't need to see all that. Why didn't you tell me you were his ex-girlfriend?" "That's the problem," said Kim. I didn't know I was his ex-girlfriend, did I? He didn't even bother to tell me. He didn't have the decency to break up with me. It might have been nice to know what was going on. As far as I'm concerned, those two are welcome to each other. That girl looks as scaly as Ethan. It is cruel what they did to you, agreed Georgia. Ethan should have known better. I thought he was a gentleman. Maybe he didn't want to hurt you, but he didn't go about things the right way. At least come inside and have a coffee. No, said Gemma, shaking her head defiantly. I'd rather drink dirty bath water than step into that house again. Kim did not remember the bleary trip back to the fancy Boston hotel, as she gratefully sank back into the leather seats of the taxicab, holding her purse tightly to her chest like a little girl might cling to her teddy bear when she's frightened or feeling insecure. The taxi driver, on picking up her Melaconia, politely asked her if she was all right. Kim nodded. Just had a bit of a shock, that's all, she said. She was not sure what the taxi driver said in return, but she nodded when he said something. Kim felt numb. She saw her dreams of spending the rest of her life with Ethan going up in a wisp of smoke. She had never known life could be this cruel. She had never expected to find Ethan in the arms of another young lady who claimed to be his girlfriend. How dare he treat her with so much disrespect, as if the long years of their childhood they'd spent together were as insouciant and unremarkable as the teacher's chalk on her blackboard that could easily be wiped away in a single swipe. She was caught up in a roller coaster ride of denial, shock, disbelief, and then the daunting revelation that things would never ever be the same again, and that Ethan was now a memory of the past that she needed to forget all about. She returned to the hotel, her eyes brimming with tears, her face blotchy with redness. But then another emotion, like an unwelcome house guest, stepped forward in the threshold of her mind, and she found herself entertaining a furious anger, as on the inside she was spitting with the venom of the molten lava from a volcano, and in that moment she decided she wanted nothing more to ever do with Ethan Hansen again. He was a prize jerk, and she'd be damned if she wasted any more time fretting over him. I hope you're feeling better, ma'am, said the taxi driver sympathetically, when she paid him. On arrival back at the hotel, Kim found herself feeling almost faint. She marched into the breakfast room, with a sign that read, "Breakfast being served," grabbing her attention. She had been a prize idiot coming here to Boston. Her mother, dad, and brother had been absolutely right. Ethan had deliberately blocked her phone calls, and she had not seen the writing on the wall. How could she be so ignorantly naive, so whimsical? Ethan had found the woman in Boston a lot more exciting than he found her, and maybe with so many girls around, he was spoilt for choice. A waitress greeted her warmly with a friendly smile when she entered the breakfast room at the hotel, and guided Kim to a lovely table overlooking a pretty courtyard. Filling her cup with coffee, Gemma made her way to the breakfast canteen, where she generously ladled her plate with sausage, egg, and bacon, and piled onto her plate some sweet pastries. She was sure if she stuffed enough food away, she'd block out all the hurt. The wonderful weekend she'd planned to spend with Ethan was never going to be written on the script of her life. She didn't care about staying here at the hotel anymore, in the lap of luxury. Once she'd stuffed herself with a hearty breakfast, she'd take the next flight back home to North Carolina, and if she never saw Ethan again, it would be way too soon. If he ever had the audacity to look her up again and wanted to resume where they'd left off, he was living in cloud cuckoo land, because it would never happen. She could not bear to think about the pitiful expressions she'd see on her parents' faces when she returned to North Carolina, and painfully conveyed that they'd been right about Ethan all along. Kim began to fill up on the delicious hearty breakfast set before her, and immediately began to feel better, as she tasted the salty bacon on her tongue. The breakfast room was not very busy. There was an elderly couple eating breakfast in the far corner of the room, and a young man caught up in reading the paper, who glanced up at Kim briefly for a moment, catching her eye and giving her a warm smile, and then returning to reading his paper. Kim began tucking into a piece of sausage with gusto, like a half-starved orphan that hadn't seen food for many months. The next thing she knew, she was choking on the sausage, and she couldn't breathe. Her eyes began rolling in the back of her head, and she was gasping for air. But a piece of the sausage was stuck in the back of her throat, blocking her windpipe. She couldn't dislodge it. The next thing she knew, a powerful pair of forceful strong arms was squeezing her under her ribcage, skillfully performing the Heinrich manoeuvre on her. And then a large piece of sausage catapulted out of her throat and went smashing violently into the window like a bullet. Kim began coughing, spluttering and wheezing, and gasping for air, as a kind hand was slapping her on the back, asking her if she was all right. Kim's face reddened as she found herself looking up into the face of a kind-looking young man, with the warmest hazel-brown eyes she'd ever seen. He was easily 10 years older than her, possibly more, she couldn't be sure. "Are you all right?" he asked her again. "You gave me quite the shock, you did." Kim nodded. Thank you, you saved my life," she said. The waitress came over with a glass of water for Kim, her face grave with concern, and the elderly couple were staring at her with open mouths. "You're a hero," said the waitress to the young man. "This poor young lady nearly choked to death on that piece of sausage. You poor thing, it got stuck at the back of your throat. Thank God you came to her rescue, sir. I'm not sure I'd be any good at doing the Heinrich manoeuvre myself, so you saved the day." "It was nothing," said the young man modestly. "I don't know how to thank you," said Kim bashfully. "My name is CJ, said the young man. "And you are?" "My name's Kim." "Lovely name. It suits you. Do you mind if I join you for breakfast? I'm alone in Boston for the weekend. I've been up here for business, all the way from Buffalo in New York. But it's lonely in this large hotel, is it not? Are you also on your own? If you don't mind my saying, when you entered the breakfast room earlier on, I noticed you looked rather sorrowful, as if you were wearing the weight of the world on your shoulders. You looked pretty miserable, as if you've been attending a funeral or something." "Was it that obvious?" asked Kim in surprise. "I had no idea that I was wearing my heart on my sleeve. It is true. I have felt better. I came to Boston to surprise my boyfriend, but I was the one who ended up being surprised, in a manner of speaking. I witnessed the funeral of our relationship, you could say. I found him cosily curled up to another girl this morning, when I arrived at his run-down student digs. This young lady I found him dossing with on the sofa claimed to be his girlfriend. The only trouble is my so-called devoted boyfriend never informed me that it was over between us. He simply just blocked all my calls. I was such an idiot. My parents told me it was his subtle way of breaking up with me, but I wouldn't listen. I told them they were talking baloney. I booked this expensive hotel to surprise him, so we could spend a romantic weekend together. And look at me. I've got egg all over my face. I've been such an idiot. And then on top of all that, I nearly choked on a sausage this morning. I certainly got out of bed the wrong way this morning." CJ's face rippled with concern. "I'm sorry. That is a bummer. I don't know what to say. Where are you from, may I ask?" Gemma told her about her small rural North Carolina town. "I know it very well, as it happens. Me and my brother used to stay in that town when we were young with our grandmother, but she's long since dead," he said sadly. "That town is quite the contrast to a place like Boston. They could eat you alive for breakfast if given a chance. There is so much going on here, is there not?" CJ was so easy to talk to, and he listened to Kim intently, and she found herself telling him all about her boyfriend Ethan, and his betrayal, and how angry and frustrated she felt. "You're better off without him," said CJ soberly. "You can do a lot better than someone who treats you like that. You deserve so much more." "Are you married?" asked Kim, looking into the man's hazel eyes that suddenly filled with sadness. "I am married," he admitted, "but I'm not married to a good woman. I wish I was. I have children, so I can't just walk out on her, although I've been sorely tempted to do so. Believe me, there have been times I've come a hair's breadth from walking away from her. But it's my kids that have anchored me to my home and my life. Children need both of their parents, so that's why I stay. And it's the only reason why I stay. I dare say there are many couples much like myself, choosing to make similar sacrifices on behalf of their children, so their kids grow up in a stable environment. Kim looked at him in surprise. What do you mean that she's not a good person? Your wife, I mean. What exactly do you mean by not good? Well, I mean not good. She's not kind, not considerate, not even compassionate. She's tough as an old rhino hide, and I feel as if I'm in a relationship with a crocodile. He smiled when he said that. Let's just say there are times when I think she might just eat me up. I get lonely in my relationship. Sometimes I do long for intimacy. But have you ever tried to get cozy with a crocodile? You might just get eaten up and torn apart. Kim smiled as she pictured CJ tucked up in bed with an obnoxious reptile with sharp jaws. You mean your wife is like a praying mantis? I gather that the female eats her partner while they're copulating. And when I first heard that in a science class, I didn't believe it was true. But you know what? It is. CJ cracked up laughing, as if sharing in the humour. She's not as bad as that, but it's close, let me tell you. My wife is highly manipulative. She'll stop at nothing to get what she wants and to get her way. If I left her, I'd never ever get to see my children again. I would be sure of that. She'd insist on punishing me. That's one of the reasons I stay, because I couldn't fathom a life apart from my kids. That's not good, said Kim. I've often wondered why a male praying mantis will put up with being eaten by the female. Well, maybe the copulating is just that good, said CJ, laughing. I tell you what, he said. If you say you haven't been to Boston before, let me show you around. I know the place very well. I came to university here, you see. It seems a pity you losing out on a great weekend at a beautiful hotel, or because of your ex-boyfriend. We can keep each other company if you like, and have a fabulous time together. No strings attached, of course. What do you think? It's better than going straight home to North Carolina, with your tail between your legs, is it not? You know, you make an excellent point, said Kim. I haven't seen much of Boston, so it's a good opportunity to see the place, is it not? Well, then, let's do it, said CJ, clapping his hands triumphantly. I'll show you a good time, Kim. You will not regret it. Kim had taken up CJ's kind invitation, and the sparks had been flying between the two of them. Before she knew it, the weekend morphed into a weekend of passion that they spent together, that neither of them had regretted, even though CJ was probably 10 years older than she was. She knew their relationship was a fly-by-night thing, and they would likely never cross paths ever again, which made Kim sad, as CJ was certainly the kind of man that in another lifetime she'd have loved to have had a serious relationship with. But some things were clearly not meant to be. And he had made that clear from the very beginning. He would never leave the crocodile he was married to. Just so you know, Kim, I don't do this kind of thing, said CJ. You probably think I'm just saying this, but it is true. I'm usually as loyal as they come. So what happened between us this weekend even took me by surprise. But you will never know what this meant to me. I've been happier this weekend than I've been in a long time, and you are responsible for that, Kim. I don't have any regrets either, CJ, but I do hope things get better between you and your wife. You deserve to be happy. CJ grimaced. If I had any hope that that were the case, Kim, I would never have committed adultery with you in the first place, nor would I have succumbed to temptation so easily. But just so that you know, Kim, this was not just a frolic in the hay for me. I'm not that type of man. Everything I do, every choice I make is serious. I've never been the kind of man that has enjoyed one-night stands of any kind. From my perspective, they're all dreadfully shallow. Our wonderful adventure-packed weekend we shared together meant more to me than you will ever know.
and just being in your company was more than enough for me. I can't remember a time when I've laughed so much. Take it from me, there are some lonely people out there, and I'm one of them, I hasten to say. You can even be lonely in a very large crowd of people. I will never forget you, Kim, he said, kissing her tenderly on the forehead. I will not be in touch, I'm afraid, because I'm a married man. And if my wife had an inkling of what I had done with you this weekend, let's just say I would be hung, drawn and quartered and left out for the vultures to eat. And if this was an Arab country, I'd probably be beheaded.
Well, so would I. It would probably be worse for me because I'm a female. But don't feel guilty about what happened between us, CJ. I don't. As far as I'm concerned, if your wife treated you better and showed you a little more devotion, none of this would have happened. You should tell her to get her crocodile jaws sandblasted. CJ laughed and was hesitant for a brief moment, and then asked her rather gingerly,
Please let me know your surname, in case I will ever be given the opportunity to look you up, should my circumstances ever change in the foreseeable future, which I very much doubt.
It's a mouthful to remember, I'm afraid. My name is Kim Carter Barron. CJ's face paled, and he went as white as a ghost, as if Kim's surname had stung him like a hive of hornets. What? What's wrong? Asked Kim, raising a brow. Don't you like my surname? You've gone deathly white. Are you all right? CJ laughed, but the smile on his face did not reach his eyes, and Kim was sure she saw in his eyes a hint of fear, but she knew she must have been gravely mistaken. Maybe CJ had been hit with the grim realization that this was it, and he was about to return home to the not-so-loving jaws of his wife. 11 years later, Kim had recently moved back to the farmhouse to live with her parents after having left her husband Ethan, and the divorce papers had recently arrived in the post. 4 years ago, Kim got married to her childhood sweetheart after forgiving him for breaking her heart when he first began attending Boston University. In the beginning, when he tried to get her back in his life, she had refused him, but Ethan had a silvery tongue on him that could melt the hardest heart. Masterfully, he had assured her that he'd needed to sow his wild oats, but now he'd changed and he wanted only Kim. Kim, who still remained whimsically naive, in her eagerness to believe the very best in people, had fallen for Ethan's charm. The icy wall around her had melted like butter, but now 4 years down the line, the cracks in the relationship had begun to show, and the foundations began to crumble away like an old cookie. It was like Groundhog Day being replayed all over again in Kim's life. Of course, her parents had warned her that Ethan was not ever going to change his wandering ways. Her brother Aaron had put it quite simply, once a cad, always a cad. And she begrudgingly had to admit Aaron had been right all along, as had her parents.
Sweetheart, her mother had told her obsequiously, I don't think you and Ethan should get married after what he did to you in BU. I really don't want you getting hurt again. I really don't, and I don't have a good feeling about this wedding. Call it a mother's intuition if you like, but I beg you, please don't marry him.
Mum, he's changed. He regrets what happened back then. He was young and foolish, but I'm the one he really loves. He's promised me he'll never, ever cheat on me again. But those were her famous last words, as Ethan had become embroiled in a number of fly-by-night affairs, and was forever hooking up with other women on Tinder, claiming always to be a single man, looking for a good time. And Kim had become aware of all his indiscretions, while discovering the evidence in the back of his truck, earrings, lipsticks, women's lacy undergarments. Finally, she'd had enough, and surrendered to the reality that her parents were right, and maybe a leopard did not change its spots. Her father had told her a story once about a scorpion wanting a lift on the back of a frog's back across the lake.
I'm sorry, said the frog. I can't give you a lift, because you will surely sting me, and then I will drown. Don't be ridiculous, the scorpion had said. If I sting you, then I also drown, and that wouldn't make sense. because if you drown, so do I. And what would be the reasoning for that?"
The frog agreed with this and took the scorpion across the lake, but then he realized he'd been stung.
"Why did you sting me?" asked the frog. "I'm sorry," said the scorpion. "I couldn't help myself. I did try not to. But it's in my nature, you see, to sting."
Her father had told her warningly that Ethan was exactly like the scorpion, and he was not going to change.
"Don't commit to a man like this," he'd said.
"I want out, Ethan," she'd told him one day. "I can't live like this anymore. When I married you, I didn't agree to an open relationship like this, and you're treating our relationship as if it's an open relationship."
"Kim, please don't leave me,"
he had begged, his eyes filling with tears.
"It's you I love. I can't bear the possibility of living without you. All these other women, they mean nothing. It was only a bit of fun. But you, I can't live without you. I promise I'll change. I'll get counselling. I'll do anything it takes. I admit I've got the problem, not you. But I'll fix it. I'll fix myself. I'll make it right for us."
"You can't fix it," said Kim, remembering her father's tale about the frog and the scorpion. "It's in your nature to behave like this. You will never, ever change." So there we are. That's the end of part 2. Don't you love the story of the scorpion and the frog? And isn't it so true of real life? That once a stinger, always a stinger, and it's never going to change. So until next time, goodbye and good night. I'll see you tomorrow.